questions is, in what manner would you talk about psychedelic medicine to someone who doesn't see the value or hasn't had any experience with inner travels?
Yeah, well, I end up actually talking to a lot of DEA people, and they're very interested because I actually, was able to do it when it was still legal. I don't have to sort of be so confronting that I explain that I'm still doing it. But what I found is that the DEA people are particularly curious, because the education that they've got is this is a terrible drug, it's only a list of side effects, why would anybody want to take it? And so what I explain to people is that it's kind of like taking a deep breath. It's this kind of relaxation, this sense of self-acceptance, and that it's not so different from normal consciousness, not nearly as different as LSD or psilocybin or the classic psychedelics. That it's not from nature. A lot of people really think if it's like mushrooms are from nature. If it's from nature, it's good. If it's from a lab, somehow it's synthetic, it's bad. And so I explain to people that I don't believe that even though it's synthetic, it's really helpful. And I think the most important thing to say to people is that that people get stuck in patterns of thought and patterns of feeling. And this is a lot of what Michael Pollan talks about in his book too, and that the MDMA gives a chance for people to break out of these patterns, particularly fear-based patterns, and that regardless of the experience, look at the outcomes, look at what happens to people. And I didn't talk about it, but there's a measure to evaluate the mystical experience that's used in the classic psychedelic research. And what W.T. Stace was the researcher that helped develop this measure, and he had what he called the theory of causal indifference. And what that means is that when you come to evaluate a mystical experience, a spiritual experience, that it doesn't matter what the cause. It could be fasting, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be walking in nature, it could be comes over you. But you look at the outcomes. You look at how you describe it, but even more, it's called the fruits of the experience. That's the classic test in the mystical literature is it a genuine mystical experience? Has it had positive outcomes? So I'd say for people that are skeptical, it's okay and good to be skeptical, but look at the reports of people who've taken it in therapy and see what they have to say.
And which professions do you believe are the most important to try to influence? This is related to our work here as well.
Okay, well, I think the most important profession is psychiatry. The division of psychiatry products is the group that we're working with at the FDA. And once it's approved as a medicine, only psychiatrists are going to be able to prescribe it. I mean, other doctors, excuse me, but all doctors who've been through our training program will be able to prescribe it because if they're not psychiatrists, they'll be just looking sort of at the physical health of people. But I think psychiatrists really have the authority in our culture to think about drugs. And so it's very important that we change the mind of psychiatrists. We have the former head of the American Psychiatric Association, Paul Summergrad, from 2 years ago, is now one of our main advocates. And we have a lot of support from psychiatrists. Then, of course, trauma experts, therapists who work with trauma are the next step of people that we're trying to influence to change their minds. And then drug abuse experts to sort of talk about what they see actually happening out in the world in terms of abuse potential of MDMA. And then I think insurance companies, because insurance companies are going to be the ones that need to cover this. And what we're concerned about, and just sort of think about this, is that the people that are most traumatized in our societies tend to have the least resources to pay for their own treatment. And so if we can get insurance companies to recognize that this is something that they should pay for, that's going to really permit it to spread. And if not, there are still so many people. Just think of all the people that go down to South America for ayahuasca and pay for it themselves, or to go to underground therapists and all pay for it themselves. So there's a lot of people that have the resources to pay for their own treatment, but there's an equity issue. So I think we are already engaging insurance companies in trying to help them prepare. And what it's pretty clear is that people with PTSD cost insurance companies a lot of money because they go to the emergency rooms for panic attacks. They have stress and they have more heart attacks. They have all sorts. They have more suicides, more failed suicides. So people with PTSD are expensive for insurance companies. And so if you treat the PTSD, not only are they responding to the need to treat PTSD, but they're also going to be lowering their costs. And the other, I'd say, is politicians, is trying to really educate politicians about how the drug war has been a fundamental obstruction to medicine and to the use of Schedule I drugs. And that's where we're also starting to see more growth in the minds of politicians, in particular with marijuana, and that's led the way for people that see that what they've been told and what they believe to be true is not actually true. And then I guess the final thing is the media, is to try to help the stories be told in a non-inflammatory way. And what's been pretty shocking is over the last 15 years, it's almost been uniformly positive media articles. There's very few that are critical or that are talking about horrible things that happen to people that do drugs when they talk about our research. And I think that's because things go in cycles and the culture is really ready for this, and also because we're more wrapping this in science, and it's limited, it's not the same as recreational use. So I think all of those groups strategically are where we're reaching out to.